You're listening to the newest member of the 210 Podcast Network, the It's a Guy Thing podcast. Join Mike, Rick, and Mario as we discuss the things we love in life, the things we hate, and all the stuff in between.
Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of It's a Guy Thing podcast. Here to join you guys once again for some frivolity and fun. So, as Christian Bale says in American Psycho, I would just like to see the three of us get it on.
All right, well, as Michael said, this is It's a Guy Thing podcast, and we have some topics that we kind of want to discuss today. I'm going to go first only because it's kind of hopefully a brief topic, Call of Duty, which I think is mostly a guy thing. I really rarely hear women playing or hear their voices, but then again, I always mute the chat anyway. And then after that, we've got Rick with...
the Missing Flight 370.
And then Mike with...
I think it's time for us to broach this burning topic like a flame in our pockets that's putting our bodies on fire. We need to get this time travel business out of the way before we can continue any further. So we're going to talk about time travel in movies and in other places.
Sounds good. So as far as Call of Duty, I think you guys are the ones that really got me into it. I hadn't really cared about it before or paid any attention to it, but I think you guys got me started around, what was it, Modern Warfare 2 or 3?
I think it was 2.
I'm pretty sure. And W2.
Yeah, and...
PS3, because PS3 is the only way to go. Xbox is... unacceptable.
I know.
I will say there are
I
pros
just bought
and
a brand new
cons.
PlayStation 3 and I love it. It's the best system. It fits all your multimedia needs.
Well, PlayStation 4 is superior to all. It has a twice the size gigabyte hard drive, and right now is on sale at all your electronic outlets.
So if you go to PlayStation.com/It's a Guy Thing podcast and type in code "This is fake," then nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
So
But they're awesome.
So with Call of Duty, you guys kind of got me roped into it, and I did what I
totally
do
a
with
joke.
everything, which was get completely obsessed with it. And I think I didn't really. I don't care for the missions or anything like that. I just go straight into the multiplayer. I think
I think they call it battle napping. Battle.
I think
Wow.
last week's episode proved something that we've known about you for a long time, but we've never put it to words. But now we can finally comfortably label you the way you deserve to be. Which
I'm
is
scared of this.
Mario has a beautiful, lovingly addictive personality. He catches and latches onto something, and
Don't let go.
that's right.
That's
But
right.
you know what? That's awesome because unlike me, Rick and me, you get stuff done.
Yeah, we're unpredictable.
because I've never beaten Call of Duty, and
I barely get stuff done.
That's true though. That's the upside.
But beating a video game is an accomplishment.
Well, see, but I
and
haven't
that's another
beaten it
topic for the
because
future.
I don't play the campaign.
Well, you beat the online thing by going loop,
Prestige,
looped
yeah.
or whatever it's called.
I'm a looper.
He's a time loop.
It was, and too bad that wasn't our jump into time travel in movies. But
Good one.
no, with Call of Duty, with Modern Warfare 2, I think I maxed out in Prestige once, and then maxed out again, stayed there. Same thing with the next Modern Warfare 3, then it was Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2. I haven't gotten Ghosts. I'm on Black Ops 2 right now, and I think I'm 4th Prestige now. I want to take it to the 10, just because at this point it's like, I might as well go ahead and go
What
for
happens? What happens when you get? Is there?
it. I have no idea. I don't care. It's not even about that. It's not even about what will I get for this.
The funniest part about that whole thing is that, just to explain for any of the, casual gamers or even just people that know of video games in general, Call of Duty is a first-person shooting video game where you're basically in, simulated war situations as a soldier with, automatic weapons or sniper weapons or whatever. And so in the online play, you're playing with random people all over the world. And so every time you win or lose a battle, whether you're by yourself or on a team, you're awarded points for having played so well by getting so many kills or doing certain little accomplishments. And so these points get aggregated into a little counter that says once you reach so many points, you get another ranking, like a star ranking, like, you know, first you're a private, then you're a, you know, lieutenant, and then you're a general, and blah, blah, blah. And so it takes an inordinate amount of time to get these rankings. I mean, hours spent. I've played that with you guys for I don't even know how many hours, and I'm like a 25 ranking. And I think you have to get like a level 50 to get that first prestige thing. And the worst about it that I always thought was so ridiculous was once you do that prestige thing is you lose all your weapons and all the stuff you
pretty much
for. And I really truly believe that it was the programmer's cosmic gag reel to see how many people would do this by just simply adding one extra line of code into the game program, being like, oh, this will be cool, let's see how many people take it to the next level, and we'll just sit back and laugh at them. Oh, I prestiged. But it's actually a big waste of your time. Don't get sucked in. Don't let the man control you. Don't let Infinity Ward tell you who you are, Mario.
What was it, Infinity
And
Ward
Activision.
or Treyarch?
And Activision.
Or
And
Treyarch.
Treyarch.
So a little history behind it, as Michael was going about the actual way that you play the game. The first version of any Call of Duty title came out in 2003, and then since then we've had Call of Duty 1 through 4. Number 4 was what actually titled Modern Warfare, and that kind of launched that series. After that there was World at War. Since then there's been Modern Warfare 2 and 3, and now Black Ops 1 and 2, and now most recently Ghosts, which... I haven't gotten to play yet. I know Mike owns Ghosts, and I think he was saying that you said you haven't really started it too much, right, for Ghosts?
I bought it as a Black Friday special for like $20. So
nice.
It seemed too good to be true to
Hell
pass
yeah.
up. So I nabbed it, played the first mission, which was almost so good. I was like, I have to stop until I can devote like enough amount of time where I don't get interrupted. Just because it was one of those cinematic things. It starts out in space or something like that. So
Interesting.
it's actually legit. So I want to start over and have the sound all the way up and play when no one's in the house, you know, just so I can fully immerse into it. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I might end up having to do that one then. I kept vowing that I wouldn't go past Black Ops 2 just because I did the Black Ops 2, I did the season pass so that I got all the
Have you ever
maps.
actually played the mission, like the actual story mode?
No,
like
not on that one.
On any of them, though?
No, I think I did it on Modern Warfare 2 and 3 and maybe Black Ops 1, and I went part of the way, but I love the... I hate the fact that when you play the campaigns, somebody's always shooting directly at you. It doesn't matter who, and there's always just enough damage to always keep you near death, and yet it's kind of like the old video games where I know this is where this guy pops up and does this. Or
we need to rethink our strategy. I need some help getting up.
But like, I love the.
I'm reloading. Unlimited ammo. Best part of those games. I'm reloading.
But I love the the inability to be able to put your finger on whether somebody's right behind you, somebody's right around a corner. I love the fact that some people are just dumb when they play this game, and the multiplayer is what drives me, because I love not knowing what's going to happen. And one of the things at the same time that annoys me about the multiplayer is that, like I said earlier, is that I mute everybody right off the bat, because if you don't, you are going to hear the worst. Like, it's almost as bad as commentary on posts on the internet or like posts on YouTube, just the comments, just stupid people. It's always people being a bigot or being sexist or racist or just being an overall douchebag.
Ridiculous. Even when like we had a group of us where it was like Nick and Anthony playing with us, and Joe would come in a couple times, and I think Johnny joined us here and there. That was about the extent of the group, right?
Yeah.
With us, I can't remember if Jimmy or not played.
Danny would get on too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And he would just walk around the flamethrower and burn everybody.
That's right.
He wouldn't even shoot his bullets; he just burn you.
But even with those groups, I distinctly remember like maybe 3 or 4 times max, not even more than my hand could count, where we would run into somebody online who actually spoke intelligibly and was like there to have fun the same way we were, where they weren't like these. I mean, you get online and you start hearing all these people going off, and you really start to think the majority of the world is just sociopathic maniacs expressing themselves, and they're one step away from taking it to the next level. And like, you're actually grateful for Call of Duty because it lets them express
blow off that steam. Yeah.
Because my gosh, like you
God
were saying,
forbid I actually ran into them in real life.
And not only bigotry and racism and these ridiculously over-the-top crude things, not that we're not, but in that environment, you're just putting all this stuff out. Well, not that part. I'm just talking about the crude stuff. No, okay, not the bigotry, not the racism.
We're psychopaths.
We are definitely psychopaths, and we're definitely crude. That's all I was referring to.
But we do it in a joking manner, and we tear each other up in a different way.
But what I'm saying is the people that create their screen names...
Oh, yeah.
That are like racist screen names.
And it's not only that, it's not just their screen name, it's what they log into their PlayStation
That's exactly
account.
What it is.
That's
is
what
that
the whole world sees.
Exactly.
Right. And like I thought about the first time I ever set up my PlayStation account, I used, whatever the name was, and
you don't want to tell us so we can add you.
Oh, it's Team Felix. You know that. So, but the thing is, like, I didn't like think that, like, I can't ever change this now. Now that's what everyone will see me as, and exactly like you said, like you go on there and you see the names that people come up with, and they have no shame about these names. And maybe they have 10 different accounts on their computer they can log into or whatever.
Best name ever, Baconator.
Yeah,
I've never forgotten that.
but I'm just like, it's to me, it's a terrifying thing. Like it
Yeah.
What I like about playing those games, because I'm not a gamer, I don't consider myself a gamer because I'm not any good at them, and I devote the littlest amount of time as I can to them. But I enjoy it. I enjoy it because usually when I do play Call of Duty, at least nowadays, it's when I know I have I have 30 minutes to spare. Mm-hmm. I have to be somewhere in an hour and a half, and I'm always running late. And I have 30 minutes extras to spare, I think. So I'm like, I know that it takes 15 minutes to play 2 deathmatch sessions, so I can play 2 games and then put my shoes on and go. And it's okay because it doesn't require anything. Like even if I have to turn it off during a match, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. I'm not saving anything. You can walk away. The rewards, the points don't matter to me. I can just walk away. I can have fun for 10 minutes, turn it off, and it doesn't matter. Whereas other things do kind of require a little bit more investment from you. At least you think they do.
Yeah.
But on the same token, that is also what I hate about it. I hate that I can play, a couple of death matches and turn it off and go to bed and go, wow, like I could have been doing something else, anything else. I could have been reading a book or been washing clothes or something, because I'll never get that back. Yeah, and there's no tangible result, because I'm not even good enough to say, to show my friends and be like, hey guys, I'm ranked 10,000 out of 20 million people. I'm not even that good, so there's not even that benefit for me. And like you guys are mentioning, seeing some of the stuff that people put on there, that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest, I don't want to say it's the attraction of it, but that's the part of the game that sticks out the most to me, is that, much like the internet, like you mentioned it, like commentators and stuff, is that it's the perfect wall for people to hide behind and express anonymity. The nastiest, most horrible things that they can do and say about, people.
And sometimes it's 8-year-olds.
Yeah, and they're kids. And it's like you hear kids saying these things and using words that no one should use. And then sometimes it'll be a guy who you can tell is our age, and he's got his headset turned up so you can hear the whole room and you can hear his baby crying next to him. Mm-hmm. That's the worst, I think. It's a guy and you hear him playing and the baby's crying and you can hear the wife in the other room screaming at him to feed the baby or take the trash out, and he's like, shut up, I'm almost done. And it's that's not fake.
Yeah.
It's not like this guy's not creating that persona to play video games. that's him trying to avoid real life.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what intrigues me about it. On one level.
See, and I turn all of that off.
And I do, because I get fed up with it pretty quickly, but it's just such an interesting taste of how the world can be. Not necessarily how the world is, but how the world can be.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's something that it stays relevant, because it is kind of, if I had if I was a teacher or if I was a parent and someone was asking me about the state of youth or the state of the world, I'd say just turn on your kid's Call of Duty game for 10 minutes and listen to it. Yeah. Listen to what people say. Listen to how people talk to each other. And that'll give you an idea of not the end-all and be-all of how the world works now, but the things that kids are exposed to.
Yeah.
The things that are out there that you're constantly
trying to keep them away from.
Yeah, you're trying to keep them away. You're trying to steer them away from the very thing that's out there, fighting you for their brain's hard drive space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like I said, I always mute it pretty much. I think as an experiment the other night, I left it on, and some of it was helpful stuff like, oh, dude, they're coming down the middle. Okay, that's good information. I can use that. And then there's the, oh, man, these campers. Here's one thing that we'll get. Yeah, this is the whole thing that bugs me. It disturbs me when people say something about somebody else's play style. Unless they're saying that they're a hacker, and they actually are, then that's different. Because people have hacked previous games. I'm sure somebody's hacked this newest one or whatever. Right. But when people are like, "Oh man, that guy's camping," okay, well, to me, that means he's not moving. He should be an easier target for you. So stop complaining. A and B, it's a valid way of trying to play the game, because what do our soldiers do? Oh, they snipe from as far away as possible. So
that's like saying in a sports game, like, oh, this guy's scoring a lot because he's taller than everyone else.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, well, that's
strategy.
This is a strategy. Exactly.
It's not illegal to be tall. It's not illegal to play a video game and play by whatever rules and parameters are set forth.
Exactly. I think that's part of the reason why I'm bad at video games, because especially games like that where your character can die. I can play, I love Madden and I can play it all day long.
I love it every time Rick dies. He's like, God.
But that's the thing is, like, I think my survival instinct is so, like, sensitive that, like, it affects me negatively when I get killed. I'm like, oh my God, like, I feel like I really died. And I hate that feeling. Like, I hate that feeling of, like, oh, and I can't control it, And it's, and that's why it's hard for me to really get my head around why people love it so much, because it is the antithesis of war and strategy. It's not that. I mean, not that that I sit around and play Risk or whatever, but it's the same thing as, like, people get on it and they consider, like, normally, more often than not, if you look at, like, scoreboards, you'll see that the guy who has the most kills also has the most deaths.
Yeah.
And the fact that, like, and maybe I'm looking too deep into that, but the fact that, like, that is a qualification for being good at something,
right,
is difficult for me to get my head around.
Because then they're just playing statistics.
Yeah.
They're just saying, if I run out into the middle and just fire off randomly, I'm going to hit something.
Is there an honor code to online video gaming? Is there? Because, a lot of these guys, they complain about the way somebody plays, and that's their whole way of justifying that they're being beat. Oh, that guy's just sniping. Oh, that guy's just a camper. But you're playing a war simulation, battle simulation video game. And I think the reason, Rick, you're so emotionally tied into your guys, I think you secretly think your guy is Michael Biehn from Terminator.
That's right.
You don't want to see him go. Kyle needs to survive.
He's got to, man.
For the mission's
sake.
He's
got to do his seeding.
But we're going to talk about that in a little bit, because I'm really tired of these infinity loops. But anyway, I think that's the neat thing about Call of Duty is the culture that created. And to this day, like, I don't hear about it as much, or maybe it's just us.
I think we don't talk about it as much.
I think we don't talk about it as much, but it's still huge, right? I mean, but
yeah,
the demographic is about the same. But I don't know. I don't know what it is like. I always knew when we were playing it, I knew it was only going to be for a little while. I knew we were just going to be able to jump on, but there was something kind of exciting about it. Like you were saying, Mario, just another thing for us to do together. And yeah, you're right. I mean, it isn't just a guy thing. I always thought it was so badass when I would hear a girl on there being like,
which was rare, and
it was rare. It was very rare.
Or if, like, somebody had a tag name that,
like, Kitty
seemed
something.
like it might have been a girl, you're like, oh, that's cool. And every once in a while, like, someone would get thrown into our little team group, and you're like, is that a girl? And not because you're like, oh, I'm gonna talk to her, but as you're just going like, oh my God, a girl's playing. Like, this is rare. It's like the unicorns on our team, like. And
I always thought that was awesome, and you'd hear her talk all intelligently and get excited about whatever kills or complain when she lost or whatever. That was really neat. But
and it was probably just a guy with a voice
with a voice change.
His ball just hasn't dropped.
But yeah, I mean, I think it is a good barometer. Like we were talking about in the previous episode about things that you choose to devote your time to things that you allow to occupy your time, that you place value on. Or none of us are rich people. We don't know anybody that's what we would consider rich. So to us, our most valuable currency is our time at this point. Especially for you guys, you're married and you have kids, so your time has a different type of value than it had 3 or 4 years ago when we could play this for 3 or 4 hours a night. In those instances. And it's interesting now, to nostalgically, you kind of bring it up to look back and go, wow, remember when we used to do that? And now you go, wow, what do I do with those 3 hours now? And it's different probably for all three of us, or, on different ways. So, things you occupy your time with.
Well, what do you occupy your time with, Rick? I know before we started you were kind of talking about the lost plane. Was it Oceanic Flight? Is that
A-15? No. Too soon, man. Show's only been gone for a couple of years.
I only say that because
we should not make fun of Lost like that. It deserves.
We should.
It deserves more credit.
I'm gonna put this. I'm gonna put this on the table now, Mike. That we will devote a future episode to Damon Lindelof. So just put it out there, because some people don't know who that is, and the people that do know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and we're going to have to at least Twitter, what is it? Like, you send his name, link to the podcast so he can listen.
He's not on Twitter anymore.
Oh, he
jumped off because he was bullied. Oh. People hurt his feelings about Star Wars and all his.
I'm one of the people that
real
don't
shorts. We don't get too far off. Damon Lindelof's a screenwriter and a producer. He was one of the co-creators of Lost. Okay. One of the co-writers of the Star Trek movies, the reboot movies. Mm-hmm. He's produced a couple of things. He also co-wrote the Prometheus movie.
Oh, okay. If you love Prometheus, then you'll love Damon Lindelof's writing style.
Yeah.
Where all questions are answered and it's very intelligently expressed and cohesive and makes total sense.
Yeah. I would almost love to switch my topic just to him, but we can move on to something else. But no, you're bringing up my time, and that's the thing, is I have a very short attention span, I think. And the internet is a horrible thing for me, which is why we're talking about why I hate it. Because it's so easy to jump back and forth between things that are interesting or things that, you don't have to go to school for 4 years to know anything about space or about science or about business. You can just learn just enough of what you want to know about something to act like you know something about it in a conversation, which is great, because that kind of opens up social doors for everybody, so that you can play fantasy football, or you can skim across headlines on Yahoo, and you can kind of go anywhere and kind of at least get into a conversation with people, or at least have a starting point. Yeah. And for me, like, the thing that I always find myself jumping back and forth through is conspiracy stuff or supernatural, paranormal stuff. Like that's really my wheelhouse. That's things like I love discussing and
huge
talking about.
X-Files fan talking here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And for better or worse, and I'm not. I certainly don't hold any of that stuff as like a holy grail. It's like I can just as easily tear that stuff apart as lift it up because it has that value to me. So something that's really been intriguing me lately, just like the rest of the world right now, is this Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. And the first day or two, it wasn't on my radar. It wasn't, because I was looking up other stuff in my spare time. I was looking up stuff in my spare time that I normally look up, or checking my email, whatever. And Jeff had sent. He's like, "Oh, what do you think about this Flight 370 thing?" And I knew about it, but I really, I don't have news channels on my TV, so I don't really. It's not there. Yeah, but I was like, I don't know. Let me look around and see what I think. So I start reading some of the articles and start kind of looking into it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, now I have kind of an opinion, and it is in my realm of things that interest me, because now it's not just and of course, let me start off by saying that, like, all, of course, prayers and respect to the people that are missing. There's absolutely. Not to make too light of that, because there are lives that real lives that are involved here, but for the sake of conversation, and this is what we're all doing, this is what the whole world's doing, is speculating and talking about this, because it's something that doesn't happen every day. It's something that's for all intents and purposes is paranormal. I don't, am I wrong? It almost fits the definition. It's outside of the normal. It's beyond the normal. It's something that doesn't happen every day. Mike, we were talking kind of pre-show. Mike was talking about that. Like, the NSA, here we are in this digital age, information age, where information is currency and all this stuff, and people are talking about their freedoms being infringed upon and blah blah blah, all this stuff. But then in the same breath that we're talking about Ed Snowden and all the NSA leaks and PRISM and FISA courts and all this stuff, and everyone's up in arms about it, in the same breath, the same people that are talking about that, the media, are in the same breath saying, well, technology isn't really that good that you can find a plane. The world's plane. Really big, like you can't have sensors and radar everywhere, and you're like, and it's such like a, what do you call it, man? Like, I don't get it. I don't get.
I think the BS meter starts to go off because again, it's just a simple fact that any, I always think back to Google Earth. The Google Earth is an amazing program, and I'm not plugging them, but it is, Google is a monster company. They do amazing things, and they offer a lot of free products, where other companies might, charge for it. Of course, Google can afford to give stuff free because of their advertising system and all that. But the point is, Google Earth is a free product available to us. You can get on Google Earth and you can satellite image anything, anywhere. You can zoom in on the pyramids, on the Sphinx, and I haven't done that in years. So I don't even know what it looks like, but I know the amount of satellites floating around above Earth. It must look like the not that the satellites are garbage, but the amount of visual clutter in space orbiting the Earth reminds me of that in WALL-E, where you just see all that stuff floating in space, all the garbage and stuff that we left. I imagine, when a satellite is outdated, you really can't do anything to like, let's send the upload program for a sharper lens. It's kind of like, well, let's just set that one loose, give the programming code where it just flies off into nothingness, and we'll launch another one that's got a better camera. So if we can zoom in to extreme detail with only a top-down view, and now with Google Street View, you can do a horizontal view of residences and stuff like that now, and that's available to us, the government, and other governments have to have something beyond that.
In real time.
Real time,
not only
well
that, but
beyond that, and also covering the entire globe. Because, again, it's hard for me to believe that there's areas where it's like, well, because a satellite, the beauty of a satellite is it has no jurisdiction.
It's constantly moving.
It's in orbit.
As long as you're in those windows, when it has that view of that part of the Earth, then you can. Theoretically, we assume, I'm not a scientist,
I'm
but
assuming as well.
You have access to that stuff.
Well, not only that, but what do they say? The governments and the military have technology 10 years ahead of what the consumers have. Or 20 years. What was technology like for us 10, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Holy crap. I mean, seriously? It's a freaking giant plane.
Yeah, because 15 years ago, if you had said, there's going to be this program that you can zoom in on your house or your friend's house or the pyramids, you'd be like, how much is that going to cost? That's crazy. And then to say, well, no, it's free and everybody has it. It's on your phone. What? A phone?
Phone can do that?
Yeah, we're not asking the satellites to locate the heart of the ocean diamond from the old lady in the Titanic. Did the satellite watcher drop it? I mean, that I could understand. But this is, and again, I understand proportional to the size of the Earth, a plane is a speck. But again, just from what I've seen the satellites capable of doing,
they can locate an actual speck.
Well, it's so easy for conspiracy theories to go rampant because, again, why that country, and then of course now, all the issues going on with Russia, and now our United States media is presenting that all the other surrounding countries have been cooperating into giving up their information or flight manifests, or whatever it was, passenger manifests on all the people, except for Russia and Ukraine. Yeah. They're purposely not cooperating. They're purposely. It just starts to. It just starts. All starts
sound
to
like.
It just all
Well, you
starts
mentioned
to
earlier,
piece,
like wag the dog.
Yeah, it's all coming exactly. It's all coming together as far as getting these little
sentiments built up.
It's locking the mental guns. It's cocking the guns of the American public in a way that's prepping everybody for a non-shocking next step. It's not going to be as big of a deal because, well, now we're going to start, a battle or a war or an invasion or we're going to respond with sanctions. It always starts with sanctions or some kind of
trade embargo.
yeah, exactly. And now everyone's like, oh yeah, well it makes sense because we read that report or we heard that report that that country wasn't being helpful. And again, it's I don't think the United States reports on these things unless it's important to us in some roundabout way.
Yeah,
because there's a ton of other non-country things.
Yeah,
that
because
have
you have
to
to
do
imagine
with
somewhere on the Earth right now, there's missing people. There's a car.
Have you ever YouTubed cruises that aren't United States cruise ships and looked at YouTube footage of them when they're like toppling, and you can see people literally sliding up and down the floors with tables and plates food, just like it'll show like these other cruise liners. Like our cruise liners, I think the only things that get reported is when like the rotavirus or the norovirus it gives half the passengers gastrointestinal
or when it's like a hard copy type story where like some newlyweds, like the guy falls off and disappears, and they never know what happened to him, who killed him.
But you can YouTube these like foreign cruise ships, and you can literally see footage of complete where you can see it topsy-turving, and you can see camera footage of like people sliding up and down, very similar to like the footage in Titanic where people are sliding back and forth. You can literally see it happening with all the stuff.
Are they playing Celine Dion over the overhead?
It looks ridiculous, and it almost looks fake, except not for the fact that it's so
like a handheld
perfect.
camera.
And I'm thinking to myself, that's never news. That's never like today. This cruise liner from country X, had people slipping and sliding, and there were this many injuries or this many fatalities. Because I can't imagine everybody came out of that just perfectly fine without a snapped neck or something really dangerous. But we don't hear about it. So that my point is, why is this specific plane of people being reported so heavily, and now they're tying it to Russia?
Why does the media?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, and they keep, you hear it pop up left and right. Is that people keep saying like, what happened? What happened? Was it a hijacking? Was it a fire? Was it some sort of accident? Was it a mechanical failure? Was it an abduction?
Was it a black hole?
Yeah, whatever it is.
Really?
But like anything else, it's not. Sometimes the question you should be asking is, how did it happen? Is that why did it happen, or why? What would be the reason for whatever your explanation is? Like if somebody hijacked it, why would they hijack it? If it disappeared, why? How could it disappear? Why would it disappear? And there's all sorts of stuff loading down. I mean, every day now, as this story's kind of dragging out, and there's less and less physical, tangible facts or evidence, of course people were having to speculate. Like right now we're talking about the black hole thing. That's the first time it's kind of popped up where an actual, newscaster was like, what about black holes, and honestly, I was asking that on day 2. I'm like, why are we not talking about aliens yet? Why are we not talking about aliens and, all these other stuff that people don't usually talk about?
I like what you referred to Lost. Well, Lost is a TV show, so that's not even, we won't have to go there.
But, I mean, that's the thing is going back to Mike's point about how is it relevant to us? In the same, and I guess within the same question is that, okay, this plane disappeared. How is that relevant to us as Americans? And tying that into why would that happen?
Right.
If it was hijacked, what's the significance, to the people that were in the plane, people that operated the plane, people that possibly took the plane, and then, of course, what is significance to us as Americans? Why is that a newsworthy story?
Right.
I mean, something that is, and you could go round and round about different ideas and conspiracies and stuff, and something, it's like, you find things to relate to about it. Maybe if you have interest in aviation or in traveling the world, or you happen to fly a lot for your job, you find different reasons why you can relate to the story or find interest. Me, one of the things that pops up to me, and is that 20 of the people that were on the plane that disappeared, they're from a company that's based out of Austin. It's a semiconductor company. So, I mean, to me, and that's me, of course, being a conspiracy, nut, and, liking movies and loving conspiracy movies, immediately your mind starts, like, figuring out little plot lines, for the sake of it. You're filling the space because you don't know the answers.
Right.
And, of course, that's, I'm sure, a coping mechanism for not having answers.
But when that gets on the news and they're like, maybe it was a black hole that opened up. I mean, that's, to me, that's when speculation is bad, when it's on a news
I almost
vehicle.
Don't have a problem with that. I mean, the problem I have with that is that they're saying it with a smirk. They're not saying it seriously. The thing is, I think when something happens, you have to be able to open all the doors. You have to give yourself the opportunity to explore all the ideas, because what happens normally is that something happens and we immediately say, depending on the, whatever is the hot topic in society at the moment, and everything's always, oh, maybe it was terrorism. Anything happens, like Mike tripped at the gym, maybe it was a terrorist. And that's the thing, that's the first thought is like, and which is kind of sad, because like with the 370 thing, almost the first knee-jerk reaction was like, oh, it was the pilots.
Right.
Oh, this guy had a flight simulator in his house, and oh, he supported this, one of the politicians there that just got sentenced to jail, and it was a political statement. Yeah. And that's shitty, because that's the easy route. It's the easy, like, who's the easiest person to blame? You blame someone that can't defend themselves. They're not around to stand, to testify on their own behalf. People, they made it such a big deal. And this is, we're talking about our own media. I'm not reading media from, other countries like or watching news reports from anything else. They're saying, oh, this guy had his flight simulator in his house. Like, he's dude's a pilot.
Yeah.
It's like a cop. Oh, this cop has guns in his house. That's weird. No, it's what he does. Yeah. It's something he's trained to do. He's an expert. Yeah. And they're digging and they're digging and they're digging. And
I think in a post 9/11 world, the first thing somebody thinks about when they think of a plane is that it's a flying missile. And I understand why they would go that route, but I do agree with you. I think that picking the easy targets and going that route, but that's because it lights people on fire. It gets people interested. It gets people wanting to know more. It freaks people out. And the whole thing about media was what? If it bleeds, it leads. That whole idea that freak out the public, it'll get their attention, they'll tune in. And then we can talk about black holes, or is it lost? Is it,
Now, somebody educate me on black boxes. Is that a common thing on all planes in the entire world?
Yes.
And they are not available to the pilots. Like, you can't, get a screwdriver and open the tin beneath your feet and pull it out, right?
No, they're actually located in the back of the plane.
But can they get to them? Aren't they inaccessible? Like, you can't send this co-pilot to running to the back and be like, hey, go get the black box and disable it.
See, here in the last week or two, that's some of the stuff that other than occasionally flying in the plane, I have no aviation experience. I'm not an engineer. I don't know how this stuff works. But up until the past couple of days, now you're hearing they turned the transponder off.
That's what I heard.
They
too.
turned, I thought, maybe they're different things. The black box thing is a separate thing from the transponder, but it's the same token to me. I'm like, why should you be allowed to turn off the thing that helps people find you if you disappear?
For situations just like that.
Exactly, because on any level, that's something you probably would never want to turn off. Whether you're hijacked or you have some sort of, catastrophic mechanical failure, you want that thing on at all times. And they're saying, well, you have to kind of keep some of that autonomy, to keep the humans plugged into the machine so the machine doesn't make the error, blah, blah, whatever. But at the same token, it's like, why can you turn the sonar off? Why can you turn the radar off, or the transponder? Whatever it is, whatever the technical language is for these things, why can you turn them off?
It's sort of like the whole, filmic... when you have a spaceship with a self-destruct button, who installed it?
Yeah, why?
Why would it even?
Why
be
would
there?
it destruct?
Why would it be there? I have no comprehension.
It's a rescue pod. Why would it self-destruct?
Yeah, I have no comprehension for that stuff either. And it just lends me to thinking logically. Again, who's on that plane, and why would something like that occur in the most logical sense? Like, what's the most logical thing? Because when you play back 9/11 and we play back the why of the terrorists and Bin Laden's purpose for everything, right? It was just to prove a point, right?
That we could hurt you.
Right. That was the whole thing, was just to exact damage.
We're going the non-conspiracy theories.
Right. If we're just going with what we know, and what we believe and what has been presented to us, because I've, never spoken to anybody that had any involvement with any of this stuff. I just know it was presented to me. Then the motives was pretty similar, and to quote, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight series, a lot of criminals aren't complicated. They either have a very basic agenda or they want to watch the world burn. And that's kind of very similar to what we saw in that. So I'm thinking with the Malaysian flight, it's like, what are the most logical reasons that pilots would cause something like that to happen themselves? Or, again, another act of hijacking or terrorism and stuff like that But again, the thing that I keep coming back to is why this specific story. That, you know, again, but you were saying, see, now Rick's already enlightened me. You're saying there were Americans on the flight?
Well, I think there were workers from an American company. I think I could be wrong, but the bulk of the 20 people, and they were employees of the Austin company. It's a semiconductor company. I believe they were Chinese. I believe they were, you know, Chinese nationals. They were working here, living here, but they were going back home. Mm-hmm. And it's not a strange thing. Like, they're traveling.
Right.
This company has offices all over the world, so they're traveling back and forth. So it's not bizarre that this many employees were from the same company were going to one place. I mean, that's not what's out of whack. It's that the thing that sticks out more is that, again, going back to like movie plot lines, is that you have 20 probably, you know, IT guys or computer engineers or electrical, some sort of thing. I mean, they work for a semiconductor processor company or something out of Austin, which is like a little Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah.
So you have to assume that whatever they deal in is high-end technology. So that, to me, and that seems like, and that's what I'm talking about. Maybe me, because of my geographic location, I live in Texas, we live 45 minutes from Austin, that's more interesting to me. I'm like, wait a minute, why is this not being talked about? And maybe, you know, and granted, there's all sorts of avenues that maybe we haven't heard or been exposed to. So maybe on some fringes, people are talking about it.
Yeah.
But like I said, I try to, because I'm interested in the topic right now, I'm trying to read regular news sources as well as the idiots, you know, these stupid conspiracy sites. Mm-hmm. And even they don't really talk about that. They're talking about like, well, you know, it's this and this. And the big thing, even on the conspiracy side, it's hijackers. Mm-hmm. They hijacked the plane, landed it on some tiny island in the Indian Ocean that they built an airstrip on, you know, months ago, or they, you know, rode in the shadow of another plane's radar signal and then diverted to a different landing site so they could kill all the people and then retrofit the airplane as a weapon to be able to use in some, you know, to be determined plot. Like, to me, like, that's both sides of the aisle as far as extreme ways of thinking. And to me, that's overly complicated.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, the 9/11 thing, it's like somebody hijacked a plane this morning and an hour later they crashed it.
Right.
Yes, it took years of planning probably. Yes, there was a lot of moving parts, but
the end result
was immediate. Like, to me, it doesn't make sense you'd hijack a plane. Now, if you were going to hijack a plane and do something with it, you would do it right then and there. You would go, what's the nearest, metropolitan area that I can destroy that's on my agenda, whatever that is.
Right.
And I'm assuming there's, you know, in that geographic area, there's plenty of places you could hit. Mm-hmm. You know,
that would affect somebody.
On the same token, if it's some organization that has a beef with, say, America, or on the other side of the world, why would you steal a plane on the other side of the world only to try to fly it across the world to do damage? Like, doesn't even, like, terrorists aren't that stupid. The only stupid terrorist organization is Cobra from G.I. Joe that has no foresight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because anyone that has common sense or that's even seen a freaking movie understands that, like, you don't make things more complicated than they need to be.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm not an expert in these things, but that's my personal opinion as a normal person. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. I mean, we're looking today at, like, they were talking about there's a a Navy air base. It's not actual like an Air Force base, but it's an airfield.
Oh, okay.
It's on this little island, Diego Garcia, in one of the British Isles in the Indian Ocean. Blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. And all they use it for is basically like a waypoint, you know, between different locations. Planes stop there to refuel or get cargo to deliver it somewhere else. Guys on leave can use it as a station also when you're going from point A to point B.
Yeah. And
that's it. Well, now it's kind of popped up as like, well, you know, the military planned this. Somebody hijacked a plane, they diverted it to this Navy air base, and now it's being held there in some hangar with all the people. You're like, okay, cool, but why?
Yeah.
What's the point?
The military has planes.
You know what I mean?
They don't need...
Because even if that's plausible, and I'm not saying it's not, to me, at this point, anything is plausible. If you have no concrete answers other than, you know, circumstantial things or things that we may or may not know are fact, anything's plausible at this point.
Right.
It could have been abducted by aliens. It could have got sucked into a sea vortex or hit by a methane gas cloud out of the ocean or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, again, going back to the same point is why? Why would this happen? If it's not an act of God, if it's not nature, if it's not a simple mechanical failure, which if it is, they're going to figure that out soon enough.
Right.
If it's something bigger than that, and that's honestly like is politically incorrect of it as it is for me to say that, the world isn't waiting for them to go, oh yeah, well the engine caught on fire.
Yeah.
And it burned up, and unfortunately everyone died, and now we're going to sue Rolls-Royce because they made the engines. People want to hear, oh, it was a hijacking, and this happened, and this, and I'm not saying we want that tragedy, but that's what they're leading us to.
Right. That's
what they're talking about. And that's, one of the issues, you can have with the media is that they create the space for these thoughts to happen. They fill this shit in your head and say, oh, it might be a hijacking, or it might be this guy, or it might be that guy. And then when you actually say it out loud and you start to talk about conspiracies or talk about what ifs, they, oh, you can't talk about that, man. That's politically incorrect. Like, no, you broached the subject.
Yeah.
If all we were talking about was what kind of mechanical failures could happen, what kind of actual issues could have come up that would have caused this plane to crash, that's one thing. But we're not talking about that. That's not half the discussion isn't about that. It's about
that was mentioned for 2 seconds in the grand scheme.
So I don't know. It's interesting. That's why it's something that it's been on my head past couple of days because I think it's just interesting. Like I said, I certainly wouldn't say that I have any answers. I don't know. I have speculations, but that's me. Yeah. If you had to ask me right now without the full dossier of facts in front of me, my guess would be if it's not a simple case of some sort of mechanical failure that unfortunately led to this plane crashing and lives being lost, and that's the simplest explanation. That's probably it. Yeah. And if it's not,
is that Occam's razor?
Yeah. And if it's not, then it still ties into the same thing, which is I think possibly that it was shot down. It was shot down by one of the military, any number of countries that were surrounding this area, including ours. Reason being, and not for evil's sake, like let's just shoot down this plane and see what happens, not, false flag shit. It's, say a hijacker did get on board this plane. Say they, intercepted some sort of communique that they know this was going to happen, or they knew just enough of a lead to know it was a possibility. Yeah. Even though we know that's not the case, because we know also that the the international databases weren't searched when they went through this manifest of all the people that were on the flight. These background checks that are kind of standard, I guess, at this point, weren't done. Yeah, we know at some point that there was at least 2 people on the plane that were using stolen passports. Yeah. So obviously something could have slipped through. Right. And I'm not speculating that those 2 guys were terrorists, but I'm saying it's in the realm of possibility. So if that's the case, one of these guys, or 2 of these guys, or more than one, hijacked a plane. And at some point, whether it was the Malaysian military, or the Vietnamese military, or the Thai military, or the U.S. military, somebody figured that out due to their intelligence capabilities and said, okay, this plane's been hijacked. What do we do? Is he going to go to Australia? Is he going to go to Malaysia? Is he going to go to Singapore? Is he going to go to Beijing? We don't know. Take it out. At this point, knowing what we know from the past decade, what's the best, most realistic, common sense option? Take them off the table. Yeah. You take that off the map. You're not going to kill 3,000 people or 10,000 people. You're going to sacrifice, unfortunately, X amount of people
that were on the plane
for the sake of, trying to prevent something worse.
Yeah. And they haven't said it because who's going to want to admit
that
they did that? Right,
because no one's going to want to say, yeah, well, we shot it down, sorry, and this is our reasoning. I think that it's like anything else. You don't, you're not going to come forward with that until you have a plausible backstory. And I'm not saying it's malicious or it's a conspiracy. I'm saying you want to have all your ducks in a row and say, okay, well, this is what we know. We know for a fact that there was a terrorist on board, that a hijacking took place, that they took control of the aircraft. And at that point, it was now considered an act of aggression, and it was a flying weapon. So we made this choice, and these are the facts, and we can back it up. Yeah. Right now, they may or may not have those answers.
Do you think that they would ever cop to it if that were the case?
I think once, yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you at some point? Now, that's me giving them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. I mean, because we could go on a whole other tangent about like the TWA 800 thing, which I haven't heard mentioned in any of the conversation about 370. I mean, TWA 800 in 1996, when we were at the Atlanta Olympic Games, the day after we got there, that happened. We woke up and that was on the news. The skies over Long Island, this passenger plane exploded. And it was almost immediate. And that was a pre 9/11 world. And it was almost immediate, where the first thing that you heard coming out of the news was it was shot down. Eyewitness reports, it was shot down. We saw missiles coming out of the ocean, hit this thing and blew it up. And, and there's, again, you could go on and on about that. There's documentaries, there's all kinds of news reports about speculation about that. But it was part of the discussion.
Yeah.
And I just think it's interesting that now that's not something that's even come up.
Right.
The fact that in this day and age, that's kind of part of the protocol. If tomorrow, a jetliner was heading for the Pentagon or the White House, we know now, if we didn't know before, what the protocol is for that situation. Is you're going to try to divert it, stop it, and if it doesn't stop, you're going to shoot it down, because that's the protocol. That's what makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. So, before we end that segment, let me ask you guys, from whatever you know about this story or this event, just speculating, and we're just speculating. No one's being held to the fire on this, but what do you think? What do you think are the possibilities? Or just, you don't have to take one to your grave, just, throw something out there.
I would kind of go with what you said, but only as far as the idea that, yes, I would say that it's most likely that they realize that, okay, now it's a flying weapon, let's get rid of it. As far as the aftermath of that, I just see different governments pointing fingers at each other and nothing ever being finalized, and everybody just being left with their speculations, and maybe some more people getting credence for calling it a black hole.
Mike?
I think, listening to you talk about it, this detailed, and just the stuff I've read from the media online, I had yet to watch one piece of actual news live delivered on TV. But I think, it's funny. I realized, so much of my news is completely internet based. It's for phone internet on the smartphone. I think more than likely, something like this is probably a situation where this plane probably was not being... something is definitely awry, and not in a big conspiracy way, but like you said, either awry from a mechanical point of view, or from the pilots, having some inability to deal with something. I mean, anytime you guys are on a plane, you feel it, the turbulence. It always literally feels like 1 degree more severe than the last one. Feels like it could be a fairly serious situation. Especially on those long flights, because I think all of us have flown on like the long 8, 10, 12-hour flights, and every now and then you feel these gigantic, the scope of these machines in the air, and it's like, you feel that gigantic...
Sometimes you think, when you actually give yourself a second to think about it, you go, it's a miracle. I'm sitting in a piece of metal flying through the air at speed.
Right. So if it's not discovered, again, I think, because we were talking about the satellites and we're giving our government a ton of credit on having all this technology, but then I'm thinking to myself, in 2001, they had 2014's technology, and 9/11 still happened, and those planes were able to fly the way they were able to fly without being in contact, without being able to verify protocols in airspace and the flight plan, and they were still able to land in the locations they landed in. There wasn't secret guns that come out of the ground like in G.I. Joe and took them down to save lives. The towers were both still struck, and the Pentagon was struck, and only heroic Americans on one of the other planes took the other one down and brought it down themselves. And so I think to myself, maybe some of the things our government is capable of blows our mind where, like, intellectual capabilities are concerned, but when it concerns practical application, we're actually quite behind. Maybe we're a very reactive country where right now, if another country wanted to send a warhead over, would it be blown out of the sky? Since those, apparently they're not supposed to detonate, right? When they're shot out, that they only work on time-sensitive whatever, which is funny. You would think, well, why did someone design a nuclear warhead that blows up when you shoot it? but to counteract that, it's like, oh, there's this, universal law in the world. Everyone who builds nukes, you have to build the ones that only detonate when they reach their destination. Otherwise, it's just a little firework in the sky. Yeah. But, more than likely, I think, we're probably not going to find out the truth. This is going to be another one of those things. For me, I think I'm really kind of bent on seeing this as being used as a fuel the fire situation. Yeah. That's really what I see happening here because, I look at, like right now we're sitting here and I'm looking at CBS's news page and it's got all this, it's funny you look at the way news is presented to us now with the top trending. That's the way news is presented, 1 through 5.
What's popular.
What's the hot topic. And it's it's got this Malaysia airline stuff and then to the right of it's like, President Obama's NCAA bracket picks.
Yeah.
So, but it keeps mentioning now Obama put more Russian officials through sanctions and stuff like that. And it's like the timing of this kind of stuff, I don't know. It just, it doesn't look good. But if you're asking me to legitimately say what I actually think, I really don't know. I definitely think the thing is, gone. I don't think there's a positive end for the people, unfortunately. And I don't mean that to be cynical. I just, like you said, thoughts and prayers, and I would love for everyone to be recovered and it be, a positive outcome. But these things, especially when it's out of our scope like this, it's going to end up, it's got the air of tragedy. And it's got the air of uncertainty as far as why. Mm-hmm. And the how is less important to me as the why.
Yeah.
How isn't really as big of a deal, but why, I don't even know. Once they figure it out, if they even recover the plane, if whatever gets presented to us will even remotely resemble the real reality.
Yeah. So. And it's interesting that we were talking about the black box earlier. I'm a huge avid listener of the Stuff You Should Know podcast, and they had recorded this podcast weeks before and released it on March 12th. When did the flight come in?
March 8th, I think.
Okay, so they released this How Black Boxes Work episode, and it's like I think it's like an hour long or something, and it talks about the intricacies of the mechanics that go into it, and at what point does the box break down, and all the vigorous testing that the box goes through. So if anybody's really interested in that, I know it's kind of weird that I'm plugging a completely different podcast, but Stuff You Should Know podcast, just type into the search bar Black Box, and you'll get the episode. It's something that you should check out if you are curious about how that kind of aspect works.
Yeah, or you can check out Black Box on YouTube, which is a short movie we made that has nothing to do with planes.
I forgot about that. That was awesome. That was great.
For those that are interested, it was a parody of the Red Box, and kind of a racist kind of a thing, but if
tongue in cheek,
very tongue in cheek. But it was a lot of fun. Check out Black Box on YouTube, and
the racist opinions of Mario Zamora do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Michael and Rick. Or maybe just Michael, I don't know. Rick was part of it.
That was a party. That was a conspirator. So moving on from that, because we could talk about that forever, but moving on, not too far out of the realm. We were talking about conspiracies and strange events, and looking more to even further out of the realm of the norm. It's time travel. Your topic.
I was thinking about time travel because it's something that comes up with regularity, and I'm forced to rethink about this in a very fun. It's neat when the movie world, the film world, can bring intellectual discourse on things that aren't real, and yet have an educated foundation for why things aren't possible. So, time travel does not currently exist, and I won't even go as far as to say that we know of it. It just doesn't. For all intents and purposes, it's not real.
Because if it did, they'd be doing something with it.
Right. Right.
That's the sports almanac.
And, Stephen Hawking's, writings on it and stuff, while fascinating, it's wonderful conjecture and theory and all based in real science, which is what makes it great. It gives it so much weight. But when we're just talking about film and the way it's presented, or TV shows, I think about it, and it's sort of like we were talking about. Is there an unspoken honor code in video games? Is there truly the ability to have a convicted opinion about, a missing plane? Is there certain rules that go along with integrating time travel in a movie? If I was going to write a movie script, or we were going to write one together, and time travel showed up, I feel like that would be the thing that would occupy months and months of discussion, is how do we integrate time travel properly into the script so that it cannot be torn apart by any people like us, saying, y'all screwed that up. And of course, the biggest problems with time travel is the whole paradox thing and the whole infinity loop thing, or J loops, or whatever loop thing you want to call it.
Looper.
It's that whole thing of, if I go back in time and assassinate my grandfather, then, he's not able to father my mother, and then I no longer exist, so how was I able to travel back in time to begin with? And so a lot of movies have displayed time travel in a real fun, comical way, in a linear timeline. Back to the Future, obviously, the most popular. Terminator is another fun one that I like to mess with. And then the one that a lot of people don't understand, because it was done very intellectually and very well done, is Donnie Darko, which is another one that I really, really love the way, time travel. And all three of them, I love all of those films. The way they were brought to us. And then, of course, there's some unsung heroes that have done it pretty fascinating too, like 12 Monkeys and even Van Damme's Time Cop.
Or you could even argue Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day is a brilliant film.
I love that movie.
It's a perfect film, but you could argue it's a time travel movie.
It is.
Time loop, stuck in a loop.
Exactly. So,
am I the only one that likes Looper?
Oh, that's a good movie too.
I like Looper too. It just doesn't warrant enough discussion.
I actually like the fact that he did that, though. That in the movie he said, "I'm not going to talk to you about time because it would be a waste of."
It would blow your mind.
Yeah,
right.
like there's no way I can make it make sense to you. I like the fact that they kind of sidestepped it in that kind of fun manner.
Yeah, that's that whole Hurley talking to the audience thing from the TV show Lost. Hurley was sort of the us. He was the audience member thrust into the show to kind of make us aware of the fact that they knew some of these things were fantastical. But I like looking at Terminator first. That's always my favorite one to talk about with time travel, which is, and Rick and I, we've talked about this for years, ridiculously, and more talk about hours spent, but talking about the concept of, there's this woman who is predestined to birth a son who's going to be the one sole savior for humanity in Terminator. And so when he's birthed, it's a funny word to say.
Burped.
When
he's burped out of
when he's brought into the world, John Connor grows up and becomes this, soldier of circumstance, who then brilliant strategist, great military leader,
whiny kid,
meets Kyle Reese and says, they're going to send a Terminator back to kill my mom. I want you to follow it and protect her so that, she's safe. Mm-hmm. We presume also to make sure that nothing happens to himself. And so the first obvious question is, it's only a movie. Don't take it so seriously.
You're right.
Well, that's not the point. The point is, if that was true, we wouldn't go to the movies ever. We would only watch documentaries. So we're going to get rid of that. That doesn't count. So that's already out. The second thing is, if I'm Skynet, if I'm this artificial intelligence, if I was badass enough to, self-actualize myself and create all this technology, because the story goes they invented time travel, right?
To kill him.
Right.
That's why they created it.
Because they were losing. So instead of coming up with great military strategy to beat the humans with their superior technology, they invent time travel as a better answer. So
why wouldn't they just keep using more nukes?
Yeah. The world is already destroyed. I mean, how many bunkers can they really escape through?
But what are they eating?
But that being said, why not send multiple Terminators back, the multiple timelines, and why? Because there's only one Kyle, so why not send multiples back? Or let's say send the one back, but send him back in an era where Kyle has no help. Send him back to the lineage where she's a baby, where Sarah's a baby, and she's more helpless, or her grandmother. I mean,
Yeah.
surely they had
Technology,
records.
yeah.
Surely, by the time Skynet self-actualized, they had access to the internet and downloaded all her personal file off
Off of Ancestry.com.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the issue, is that the internet wasn't around. The internet, as we know it, wasn't around in '84 when the movie came out.
Oh, that's true.
Right.
Because if they at least had the foresight, they could have said, "Oh, it's cached somewhere."
Right.
on
So,
the server.
so I'm trying to debunk my own questions so that I don't drive myself nuts. So now I'm going to work in Cameron's world, and so now Kyle's been sent back. So all of the why didn't Skynet do this? They've all been answered. So far, Cameron passes the test in movie lore. But now we're talking about Kyle being sent back to protect Sarah, who, in my mind, when I first saw the film, when I first saw it in an age where I could really understand everything that was happening, because I saw it really young and it was just a cool movie. But as you got older, you rewatch it, you analyze it, and the first thing that goes to my mind is, oh, so Kyle's just a friend, but Sarah's eventually going to meet John's dad. And it turns out, spoiler alert, that
For those of you who have been living in a bunker for the last 20
if
years.
you've been hiding out preparing for Armageddon, then you don't know what happens. But Kyle ends up, falling in love with Sarah, and in their one night together conceive John, who ends up becoming the person that sends Kyle back. So, how do we answer that? How do we deal with a paradox like that? And the thing I came up with that I was telling Rick a long time ago was that eventually, before that happened, before Kyle was sent back, that Sarah actually did meet a guy and did conceive John, and the John that sent Kyle back is no longer the same John that exists after Kyle's back. But if that's also true, then again, how did that happen to begin with? Because now we're talking about time in this linear way. And so my question,
Because assuming you're on the same timeline, right?
So my question, bringing all this up, is there a perfect way to display time travel in a movie without these paradox questions? Can it be done? Can somebody get it right where, Marty goes back and he sees his past self, and in the end of part 1, right, Doc comes back and says, we got to fix your kids. Instead of just saying, hey, be better parents, he's like, we have to go to the future, which technically takes Marty and Jennifer out of 1985, which means everyone would have been looking for them, and after about a month probably declared them dead. So all that should have been in 2015 was 2 tombstones and no kids. But instead they're all there. Somehow they stayed in the past, had kids, but they also got to go to the future and find themselves.
Right.
Back to the Future is a more silly version of time travel.
And interesting. I like to see like a non-existent deleted scene where, like, at the end when he does come back and he goes, we gotta go back, and Marty goes, why are they assholes? Like, why doesn't he just go, yeah, like, because they are, they're little jerks, I always thought that was like, he's like, that's a great question, like, that's the first thing that would come to mind. It's like, oh, my kid a dick. Is that the problem?
There was another podcast, I want to say it was the Nerdist, that they kind of talked about the fact that at the end of the first one, where Biff is the one that's cleaning the vehicles, so the dad hired the guy that almost raped his wife when they were to school together? Is that how that works? What was that for? Oh, well, you almost raped my wife, but I'm better than that, so you wash my cars.
I'll give you...
You get your damn hands off her, but you can get your hands all over my BMW.
Yeah.
With soap and wax.
Now that's 2 coats of Biff. 2 coats of wax, Biff. Not one.
Yeah, man, Mr. McFly.
Yeah, because, George McFly was kind of a dick in his own little retcon. Like,
He's either going to be a loser or an arrogant asshole.
Yeah.
Because he's like, look at my book, son. Look at my coiffed
because he tells him, he's
hair.
like, what do I always tell you? You put your mind to something. And it's like, shut up.
Right.
You got yeah. He got lucky.
He
got lucky that someone back in time and fixed his life.
And the only reason that he had an amazing book was because Marty exposed him to Darth Vader and Van Halen.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now, I will say that, like, taking it away from film more so, I really enjoy the way that, despite the way Lost ended, I liked the idea that they brought up when they were dealing with time travel about how it wasn't linear. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember who brought it up, just because my memory is just not that good.
Daniel Faraday.
That's right.
Probably
Thank you.
Faraday, yeah.
So that was actually a different timeline. It spawned a whole different kind of future, and that when he talks about we're living our current, so even though we've jumped time, it doesn't affect us because we're in our own current timeline that's separate from the timeline that we affected.
But didn't Lost also posit that time travel never really occurs? Everything that happened already happened. So the whole
True, and that drove me nuts.
The whole big thing in Lost for the first 2 seasons is this hatch, right? This hatch that exists, and Desmond's down there in the hatch the entire time. And why was the hatch even created? Because they needed to build a station where they could, push a button that would send an electrical charge to keep the electromagnetism surge at bay. But the whole reason that thing got drilled into was because they dropped a bomb down there and caused that incident to happen. Yeah. They caused it by being back there in that timeline and caused that incident, which forced the Doctor and all the people as part of the initiative to create that station, right? So they already did it. They just hadn't gotten that
unless
to that point
they're
yet.
They created another scenario where that happened, where
exactly.
in a different,
could have still been something
in
different.
The original timeline, something else created that,
right?
Because the military was already there, right? The military was there. They had Jughead. There was all that stuff going on, anyways. So.
Yeah, like I said, I like the way that they explained it. Not necessarily that that's how they decided to go about the entire thing.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of multiple timelines. I like the idea of, well, you can do all the time traveling you want, but if you go back and kill Hitler in your past, well, you are still in your present when you go back. So Hitler happened for you. It may not have happened for everybody else. But guess what? Hitler still happened in 53,000 different timelines and multiverses everywhere else.
Yeah. See, and back to your question, then that's the thing is I think when doing a time travel movie or story or whatever is that you have to commit to one of those two things. Either you have to commit to a linear time loop where no matter what, you're only traveling back and forth on the same line, or you have to commit to the alternate timeline,
the tangent universe.
Tangent universes and the branching universes, and that's the thing I think a lot of times you have trouble with, and we've talked about that. I love time travel movies. I don't mind. I don't mind even dissecting them and having issue with them. The thing that ends up happening, though, specifically with the branch timelines, is I get stuck in with, is that you have to assume, and usually, because movies are 2 hours long or an hour and a half long, is that usually you don't usually see more than 1 or 2 extra branches to the timeline. So it creates an issue in a movie or a story because you have the main timeline and then you have a branch timeline they create, and usually they're trying to rectify some scenario and fix it so that everything goes back to normal, or so everything's the better version of the bad situation. But my problem with branch timelines is that by accepting that you can have one branch timeline, like you said, now that means there might be a million branch timelines.
Exactly.
And my problem with that's never properly addressed when they do bring that up is you get stuck into scenarios where you're talking about the soul. Now, if you're to believe that every human has a unique individual soul, what does that mean if there are
multiple timelines
and multiple
multiverses?
Yous? Does that mean that maybe that soul's getting diluted? Because by its own definition, it's no longer unique. Even if it's unique to that particular universe, if you're talking about the infinite, then, you know what I mean? It just...
That's where the argument would come in that a soul is a human construct, and that we want to feel that we are individuals, and so we created that to comfort us and to make us happy at night, when all we really are is energy, and that when the Big Bang happened, the release of energy that occurred would be like let's say, and we'll put it on a microscopic level, let's say 1,000 units of energy were created, and that's all that universe will hold. And all energy does is transfer. It doesn't go away. It doesn't die out. It just changes from one thing to the next. In that regard, then if energy works that way, then you've got that exact amount of energy in every multiverse. So if we were to try to reference it as a soul, then we could say that energy that existed in this body that you call you is different from the energy that exists in another body that you call you in a different universe.
Right.
So that would get rid of the idea of dilution.
All right. But the issue with that...
But it would disconnect us.
Right, exactly. The issue with that...
Well, and soul automatically means God. When you say soul, you're saying God, right?
Well, yeah, you're adhering to some principle of the afterlife or the principle of life after whatever it is you're currently living, because it's something that's beyond that. It's immortal or infinite or whatever. So yeah, but for the sake of this conversation, like, it doesn't work in a narrative, because, and you even when people try to do that in a story or a film, is it doesn't work because you have to place value on a life. You have to place value on the narrative. Otherwise, it nullifies the reason for it. So, in other words, that's why you have so many movies that center on the one, whether it's the martyr or the hero or the messiah or the savior or the person that just, makes a proactive choice and changes their life. That's why that's important, because we're, that's the way we're built. It's self-preservation. We want to believe that our choices matter. And that's why, spirituality or not, the idea of the soul comes up, because every choice you make matters. Whether it's a good or a bad choice, and there's a finite timeline for your life. What you do with it in between is the meat of who you are. It's your identity, it's your legacy, all of that. Yeah. So that's what that's what keeps coming back to me when we're talking about time travel movies, is that the more you dilute that, the more you complicate that, the more people lose interest. And the actual, like, literal personification is when you lose interest in a movie because it goes too many places at once. And at some point you go, either you buy into it and you say, yeah, I believe in this movie's narrative, or you say, I don't care. It doesn't matter, I'm opting out. And a lot of time that's what happens, is that when you go, it's like when you have a movie with too many characters. And then people lose track. They don't care. It very, very rarely do ensemble movies, like a movie like Traffic, for example. A movie like Traffic works, in my opinion, because even though you're telling a story of, 10, 15 people, they're very well-drawn characters. They're all people that have flaws and people that have, good sides, and, they feel real. Whereas in the same token, you have a movie like Syriana, which is a movie I really like, written by the same guy, Stephen Gaghan, and it doesn't quite succeed in that. It's telling a story where there's like 50 characters, but the problem is a lot of them are bad, shitty people that don't have that same duality. So you lose interest. You don't care. Like, I don't care if this person dies or doesn't die, or what their interests are, their motivations, because it doesn't matter. So it just goes to show. It's not an outright criticism of that. It just goes to show how delicate that is when you're dealing with, those types of issues. And obviously time travel movies kind of exacerbate that, because you're faced with those questions. You have to either in a joking way cast them off, or you have to hit them head on.
Or you can go the way that Jet Li's The One went, where you have to kill the alternate yous and all the alternate multiverses so that you become all powerful. There you go. Like Highlander or something. So did either of you ever see Primer?
Yeah, I saw Primer.
So Primer, Shane Carruth, the guy that's from Texas, from Dallas, a filmmaker, made Primer. And we would spend 12 hours trying to figure it out. Like, I really literally had to go on and find like an actual diagram online to figure it out, because I'm not smart enough to get the science of it. But it's probably my favorite time travel movie, if you're talking strictly on a science fiction time travel level, because it doesn't shy away from the subject of the implications, I should say, implications of time travel, what it means. It faces that absolutely head on, because it's not, its story doesn't take place in the world of, this guy's the hero and he's trying to save the girl or save the world. It's a lot more realistic than that. It's these two guys, they're engineers, and in their spare time they're working on a machine, and they're not trying to create a time machine. They're trying to create a machine that can change the mass of an object to be able to transport it. And that's all they're trying to do. They're basically trying to create a product, like something to say, if
like
we
a teleporter.
Almost like a teleporter.
Or like timelines faxing something from one location to the next.
Something like that. But it's not even on that far a scope. They're basically saying, is there a way that you could change the mass of something long enough that you could easily move it from place to place and then return it to its original mass. But, I'm probably not explaining it right, but that's basically it.
Right.
And they accidentally create a time machine. And the whole movie, if I'm not, tell me if I'm wrong, is about them having to have that question of, what do you do with this?
Yeah.
And they say, dude, we can make so much money. And the guy goes, yeah, but before you decide to sell it, you have to decide what can people use it for. And that's what the whole movie's about. It deals with just the implications and the consequences of time travel and what it can mean. And it's fucking brilliant because of it. And it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because it's not saving the world, it's not saving the girl, it's all about you facing you and the choices that you make, when you're faced with, those type of scenarios, life-changing scenarios.
I'll have to check that out. That sounds cool.
And another one, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the Philadelphia Experiment, the
I love it.
one.
Yeah.
That is actually the very
ago.
first time travel movie I ever saw, ever. And the thing I love about it is it's not a time travel movie. The whole concept of that film is that the military, the Navy, is trying to build stealth technology. Yeah, they're just trying to be able to hide a ship from enemy radar. That's it. And they have these giant generators, and it's fascinating technology because to me it still holds the test of time that you would need to spin this gigantic cylinder to create enough energy to light these giant bulbs in the energy room. And you've got these two random sailors who are assigned to just turn the switch on. Their job is just turn it on and make sure everything works. And literally, they turn it on and instantly, of course, they're just doing color contrast with the negative of the film to get the effect going, and it's amazing. But the most amazing thing about it is how weird it takes the turn when the ship actually disappears. It literally is vanished, but the people in the present don't know that it's vanished out of time. And what's neat is how the two main characters, well, Nancy Allen is the love interest, but I consider the two guys, the two friends, to be the main characters, and you have the sailor who everything is happening to him, and then there's the one who is left behind. And the most terrifying part of that whole film is when the ship is recovered in its original timeline, how even though all the other sailors were still on the ship, because it moved from one place to another.
Being part of the bulkhead.
Yeah, part of their bodies were fused into the ship or whatever because of the
movement in space-time.
Yeah, the movement in space-time, and that they didn't end up in the exact same spot where they first left. And I mean, that blew my mind because I'm like, well, the first time I saw it, I couldn't understand why that happened to them. Like, you see like a guy's face is on the...
It's terrifying. I remember as a kid being, haunted by that image of that shit.
It's haunting, but so fascinating because they didn't even have that much science, and exactly the same thing you were talking about with Primer. They weren't trying to build a time machine, but they figured out in the future what ended up happening, that they created a wormhole because they were moving so much energy at one time that they basically ripped through time's fabric and created this situation with their cloak technology. And I thought, wow, that's just so amazing. And I think probably my favorite movie that has really done time travel besides that one in modern is probably Donnie Darko, only because it also hits an emotional level as
definitely.
well as being that. See, Philadelphia Experiment says we're a movie about this clandestine government project. Donnie Darko says we're a movie about time travel. We even have this sub character who wrote a book on time travel, and here's the book. And to this day, I think Donnie Darko had the best website to accompany its movie that I ever saw in my life, where it finally came down. Richard Kelly, I actually sent him a Twitter once and go, hey, what happened to the site? Because it was up for 10 years at least, where you go to DonnieDarko.com and there were these different levels of stuff where you could enter information and access more in-depth stuff. And it actually had like obituaries of characters that don't die in the movie, but it shows what ended up happening to them. That keeps the story going. And I think the neatest part about that whole film was how they put the book, which it's not really a book, but the book was online. You could get the different pages of all the explanations of how time travel was possible in the Donnie Darko universe. And it's just really fascinating because basically Richard Kelly created a world where it's actually a closed loop. You don't actually, if you understand what happened, if you watch it and you understand exactly what happened, it doesn't really have any questions. It closed the loop closes itself, and it's actually perfectly done as far as I can see. All the story answers itself, and everything that was supposed to happen did. And I don't know. I think do you have a favorite Mario as far as?
I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, the whole Hitler thing, which I believe derives from an old black and white episode of Twilight Zone, where a woman is sent back in time to kill Hitler, and he's a baby, so she's got to take him out when he's a baby. And if memory serves me, which it might not, so if I'm wrong, somebody will let me know, where she does kill the Hitler baby, only to have the person that was nursing, that was like his nursemaid, replace him with another baby, which actually that baby becomes Hitler anyway. Mm-hmm. So then that's battling with the idea of, well, is it nature or nurture that developed Hitler, and would it have mattered? Like, if you were to be able to go back in the past, would that be what you would do? Go back and kill Hitler? And what would that result in? I mean, based on that universe, yeah, I mean, I get it, that possibility of, well, the baby didn't matter. It was the family that raised the baby that mattered, or the other aspect of looking at it of, well, the baby that you killed wasn't going to be Hitler anyway because you killed that baby.
Right.
Yeah, so you created a scenario for him to exist.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's always fascinating. The whole, like, if you tried to go back in time and kill your grandfather, something would just stop it. Like the gun wouldn't click or something wouldn't work. Mm-hmm. You would always be stopped because the universe
won't let it happen.
Yeah, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Like you could go back in time and see things and be a part of it, but
Marty will never screw his mom.
Right. But why would you be able to not kill your grandfather, but you could, do the whole butterfly effect thing, where it's like, well, I can't make that change, but I can stop a car from hitting me by braking in the road because I'm crossing the road, and now that car is going to go on a different path or arrive at its destination later, and everything's changed, So that's why I love Donnie Darko so much and Philadelphia Experiment, because both of them, show time existing in this non-linear way. Because I think the linear one just has too many holes. It just, now they're rebooting Star Trek with a new timeline, and they're rebooting Terminator again, and they're going to, try to interject all this film footage. And really, I think what I'm learning about it is time travel in movies is not meant for intellectualism. It's meant for entertainment for like 90% of the people that don't think about it beyond what they're seeing, but it gives people this false sense of belief that, like, oh, if Marty could go back in time and he could just start disappearing on stage because his mom and dad are starting
drifting apart.
Yeah, they're not falling for each other after all, so he's going to slowly start to disintegrate, which technically they either got together or they didn't.
Right.
It shouldn't be a gradual process. But dramatically, it's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
The suspense is amazing. Like, oh, look at his hand go.
He's disappearing.
So
yeah. I think one of the things, and you mentioned it earlier, is that the only thing I remember from science class is the law of conservation of mass is that you can't destroy matter. Like, it has to go somewhere. It changes form, and I think that's, for me, how I can justify, even plot holes in time travel movies, because you look at it and you go, no matter what, regardless of A, B, C, D, either way, things fall back into place because they have to, because you have, and that's something that Donnie Darko and Philadelphia Experiment share is that same concept, which is things have to be set right, return to their place. It may be slightly different, but that matter has to return back to where it belongs in order for the world to keep turning, right? Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, again, spoiler alert. Donnie Darko dies at the end, right? Because he's supposed to die, and that's I love that movie too, and that's one of the beauties of that moment is when he does get back into the bed and he smiles because he knows what's going to happen, right? And part of that is because he knows he is saving the world. He's doing what he was supposed to do, and he accepts it. He accepts that fate.
And that phrase "save the world" is such a grand term, but really, every single one of us has a world.
Right.
If you're a parent, your child is your whole world. Saving the world could just mean saving your child's life. Your whole world is your family and your friends, and just that small little branch of people in your little circle, to you, that's the world, and that's enough. And I think that's one of those things where that phrase is used in in Darko and other movies too. It's like, well, we have to save the world, but John Connor's gonna be the one that saves the world. You know, in his case, it really means the whole planet.
Yeah.
In Darko's case, it's literally, you know, the Jenna Malone character and a couple of other people, you know, who are caught in the crossfire of all these tragic events.
Mm-hmm.
And it's beautiful. It's one of those films you can watch over and over again.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Again, I think we could keep talking about time travel endlessly. But my question is, could I or we even just write a scene, just a draft scene where we have our own time travel scenario and write it without copying someone else's thing and have it done properly? I think that'd be a fun challenge, you know, just because it's one of my favorite genres. You know, mixing sci-fi and time travel together, or mixing drama and time travel together. I mean, it's endless fun. And then there's other little things that have touched on it. Like a long time ago, I read the Lovely Bones book, which you know, used time travel as a different mechanism. I never saw the film. I heard it was not great, but you know, there's so many. You could Google, you know, any top 10 or top 100 list of
time travel movies
and pick them and just dive in. But I don't know, it's amazing. It always seems to be one of those topics that first you have to like get everyone on the same plane explaining how it works.
Yeah,
you know, this is one of those conversations I don't think I could really have with my mom. You know, where, you know, first, Mom, we're going to do a 5-month course on time travel, which doesn't exist. But I'm going to tell you how it works.
Right, and this part of it is going to be the linear. Right. Next 5 months will be the non-linear.
You should see Primer.
Yeah, I got to check that out.
It's on Netflix.
So if any of you have any favorite time travel movies, let us know. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and on our website. It's a Guy Thing podcast. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Take care. You can visit us on our home on the web at www.itsaguythingpodcast.com, on Instagram and Facebook at It's a Guy Thing Podcast, and Twitter, It's a Guy Thing Pod. You can find us on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, and we'll be coming soon to many other podcatchers. Thanks for listening. We don't have any affiliate links or any sort of advertising set up for the It's a Guy Thing podcast just yet. However, as members of the 210 Podcast Network, we'll just play their advertisements. This podcast episode is brought to you in part by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day trial at www.210localmusic.com/audible. We get a nice little bonus if you do, and you can cancel at any time. There are over 150,000 titles for you to choose from for your iPad, Kindle, Android, or MP3 player.